Yo team, what's good? My name is Wes Smith. I'm a music producer and DJ based out of San Diego, California. In this video, I'm going to walk through making a mashup called Música de la Rooster. Thank you, Gaio Steve. From start to finish using the DJ.Studio app. My background is producing electronic dance music in Ableton Live Suite, so I'll make some comments related to that might be useful for producers that work in Ableton Live or another DAW. But if none of that is familiar to you and you're new to everything here, no problem. None of that information will be required in order to make the mashup or another mashup in the DJ.Studio app. All right? Okay, first let's go over a quick outline of what I'd like to cover. We'll start with importing songs into the DJ.Studio project. 2 will be selecting songs for a good mashup. Number 3 will be the anchor song. 4, the sample song. 5, the DJ.Studio app stems features. 6 will be identifying and extracting stems and samples that we want to use. 7 will be arranging the mashup. 8, mixing the mashup. 9, rendering the mashup. And then a wrap up to kind of review what we did, as well as talk about how you can get the project files and the original songs, as well as the finalized mashup. All right, let's go. All right, so the song was playing there in the background, and we're kind of about a minute or so into it. I'm going to go ahead and rewind that, and let's talk about the DJ.Studio app project a little bit first. So basically, when you create a new project, it would be empty, and then you have to import some songs. In this case, I'll just look at playlist. We can see the 2 songs that I've imported here. To give you an example, I'm going to go over here to the project folder that I have. We'll take a look at this list of songs that I started with. This was all the songs that I thought might make sense. I won't import all of them, but I'll give you an example. So if I imported 4 more, it's just drag and drop. Pretty cool. That'll take a second. It does some processing. It determines the key, does some key detection using mixed-in key technology, and then you end up with this list. So this is how I started. And so based on the key having been detected, you can go through these, and there's also some tools to help you understand what the various keying means if you're not familiar, as well as like the Camelot wheel that is used by mixed-in key and so forth and so on. So I'm not going to get into all those today, but I think it's important to note that those features exist as part of DJ.Studio and can be very helpful in identifying what you want to do. So I'm just going to go ahead and undo that so that I don't have those songs in there, and I'm just left with the 2 that were in my project. Okay, so we did some basics on the import there, getting them into the playlist, and then we talked a little bit about using the inbuilt tools within the DJ.Studio app, primarily around key and recommended tracks that go together and recommended type of transition that would be good in a DJ mix, which, since we're basically taking elements from the 2 songs and overlapping them, effectively a mashup is like a mini DJ mix, right? So from this point, what we want to do is let's go back over to the studio view. And again, I'm zoomed out on everything, and you can see that I've got 2 songs. I had this Música de la Casa soloed. If I unsolo, then I see all of the work that has been done and the waveforms. But let's talk about ultimately really deciding, like, these are the 2 songs I want. So let's solo this one, and let's just listen through them a little bit, and then we'll talk about the anchoring versus the sampling song. Okay? So let's start here just kind of on an intro section. All right, so it goes into a breakdown. And then let's go jump over to the build up. We'll let that play. All right, so you get the idea on that song. Now let's go solo Rooster, and let's check out that one. We'll just do a little chunk of the intro, for example. All right, so you can already feel probably that's a way more sort of minimal vibe. It's got some techno feel to it, and although the project has adjusted the BPM, when we imported them to be at 128 of the original or the anchor song. That Rooster song is at 130, and so it's headed towards the techno direction. All right, and then let's just maybe check out this part here that I really liked. Right, so you have this kind of rave stab thing.
So, do you know anything about techno?
All right, so you get the idea there. So it's a much more driving tune, right? And if you went through, or if you get the project later in the songs, you can go through and really get a feel for this first song is definitely more of a traditional house kind of elements, kick, smooth bass line, it rolls along, a bit more organic and funky. And then if you go and listen through the Rooster one, things happen quicker. There's not as many elements, and it's faster, and different pieces like that. So for that reason, I thought the Musica de la Casa track was a bit more just generally approachable for a club track. And so I wanted to use that as the anchor. And so let's talk about this anchor thing that I've mentioned a few times. If you have produced music in a DAW, then you definitely be familiar, or if you've watched tutorials where a lot of people will talk about using the kick to anchor the song. And they're really talking about once you have a kick that you want to set the volume level like at a minus 10 dB or something like that, and then use that to build all the other sounds around for loudness and other reasons. But that's kind of the idea, right? And so in the case of a mashup, like applying sort of a similar mindset and workflow, I want to pick a song that's going to be the anchor, and I'm going to then take all my samples and things from other song or songs. In this case, we're just going to use Rooster, but you could have more songs that you're pulling samples from as well. No problem. All right. And so that means that basically Musica de la Casa is going to play throughout the whole original song and length, and Rooster will not. And then let's just talk a little bit about mashups in general. Like the other reason for anchoring something that's going to keep a vibe throughout, maybe not the same if you're doing hip hop or perhaps bass music. I don't know a lot about DJing or performing that, but if you really go out to, like, I don't know, country or classic or old songs that don't even work on a beat grid because they were done in analog or something, there's been some great examples of how to do that. But for these, these are club tracks, and typically when you're doing a club set, house, tech house, techno, that kind of vibe, people are in that club for a long time, hours perhaps. The DJ sets are an hour or two, sometimes all night, and the intention generally is that there's going to be a vibe and a flow throughout the night, right? So if I'm going to do a mashup in that styling that's intended to be used by that type of DJ for those type of sets, I want to try to come up with something that essentially sounds like has a consistency throughout the song. And so if, for example, I went and let Musica de la Casa play for a minute, and then I just straight cut it out, and you end up with a whole different bass line and a whole different vocal and a whole different kick and all this kind of stuff, I can just almost guarantee you that it may sound cool in a good sound system, but from a vibe perspective, a lot of stuff's going to go out the window. So those are some of my reasonings and artistic choices, producer choices around having an anchor song. And so there we are. Okay. So we've got songs selected. We talked about the anchor. We talked about the other song, or songs would be where we pull the samples from. And so now we need to think about the tools to actually do the stems and the extraction. So let's take a look at what's going on in DJ.Studio. First of all, initially the application is really centered towards making a DJ mix, right? So you have deck 1, deck 2, sample lane 1, sample lane 2. That would be like 4 channels if you were in Ableton Live or some DAW. Okay, in this case, this is your limit for now. Maybe in the future they change that, but right now that's what we have. So you kind of get the feel of what it's like to maybe work in like a 4-track environment where that's all you get, right? And that's great because we can spawn some creativity from that, from a limitation, right? But if we look at this transition area here, then we'll see that there's a toggle option. One is waveform, and so that would show all of the automation and whatnot if I had not spread the tracks apart, because again, like I said earlier, I don't want them to overlap at all, because eventually I'm just going to get rid of all of the songs that were samples were pulled from that would be overlapped on my anchor song. And so that's why it's separated. You don't see anything here. But if I hit this toggle button, what you will see is you'll see what would be the traditional 4 stems, okay? And that's great, because you could, if you were doing DJ mixes, you could do stem transitions and mixes, which is really cool. There's a bunch of other good videos on the DJ.Studio app, website, and YouTube as well. We're not using that here, so it doesn't matter, but I did want to mention that it's in there, and it's a really great tool, and that is more in line with like the concept of all caps STEMS, where you're using them for DJ mix purposes. And that format in general, like the Native Instruments format, was years back, was created really for that purpose of using digital DJ software to be able to have these 4 pieces of the stems, kind of the low end, basically melody, some instrumentation, and vocal. And you can go research plenty on that, but that's essentially what this is modeled around, and that's if you're doing these transitions. However, we're not going to be doing that to make our mashup, but what we are going to be doing is we need to extract some stems. So let's just talk a little bit more about this. Typically, if you were to get stems to do a remix or enable you to do a mashup, meaning the elements and the different tracks within that original song are separated, so that you have, in that case, like the minimum of 4. But really, if I get a remix project and they're going to send me stems, I'm typically expecting a bunch of audio files that are the full length of the song. So if the song was 5 minutes, I'm expecting to get a bunch of WAV files or some high fidelity files that are that full length, and they could be as granular as the original artist wants to send to me. So it could be a whole entire audio file that's just the kick, and then another one that's just the bass line, and then another one that's the sub bass line, and then you could have lead synths and layered synths, and there could be 4, 5, 6 tracks of vocals. Quite often, if you're not familiar with working in producing original music in a DAW, quite often 30 tracks would not be uncommon within that DAW. So we're dealing with 4 here, and that's the example, and it's why the simplification of stems in that concept makes a lot of sense when you're DJing, rather than when you're trying to have complete full control to essentially create a new song from scratch. All right. But again, these are kind of fun limitations, and so let's go back and check out this Rooster song, and then let's go through, which would be the next item on my my list, number 6, which is extracting, identifying and extracting the samples. So let's just go through and listen to the samples that I extracted. So I'll solo this track. Okay, so just a little riser there with a little bit of the bass line in it.
So, do you know anything about techno?
Right, so there's a little bit of vocal there. Okay, it's got a little bit of more of the meat of the song. Very similar piece of the song, but that has like a kind of ship horn riser in it. Okay, moving on down. That's our rave stab kind of thing. Let's move on down. And that's Gallo Steve with his brrrr. Okay, so that's kind of the pieces that I identified that I like. So we'll just look at one, and I'll show you how that will unsolo, and then we'll take a look at how those get separated. So if you hold down Shift, your mouse pointer there will change to a selector, and then it's pretty much on the beat grid is what it's going to do. So you can see it's kind of jumping, and that's really cool. So I would go to there, and as soon as I let go, I get this menu. And then you can see here, I can copy to a sample lane, which would just copy the whole thing out without affecting the original. I could copy the drums only, and that's where the stems technology comes into play, which is really quite good in here. And then I could do the same with bass, melody, vocals, instrumental. And so let's just do an example. In this one, I copied the sample out, and you can see exactly what it did, right? And so For a good example on some additional controls, once you've done that, let's solo the piece that I took out. All right, and then let's do the same thing, but let's listen to what the sample was that I just extracted. Oh, incredibly different, right? Okay, well, the reason for that is because in addition, when I highlighted this piece losing my cursor there a little bit. All right, when I highlighted this piece and I had this menu, I had all these options, right? I could just copy the drums or maybe just the instrumental, because what I'm after in this piece, for example, is that that little bit, right? And I tried the other tools and they didn't quite give me what I wanted. So I thought, okay, well, let's just do maybe what we might do in a normal DAW situation, and let's just copy the sample, which is what I did. And the reason I did that is because I know that there are other tools in DJ.Studio, in the DJ.Studio app, and I can right click on my sample, and then I have a different menu structure once the sample's been created. So I could do things like add a volume marker to lower the volume. I could add filters, high markers, mid marker, low marker, and pitch it down, pitch it up. And those are all effects that you can apply to the samples. And so I went with the low marker, and that's how I dropped out the entire kick and most of the bass line as well. And that's pretty much what you would want to do. You don't want, especially on the low end, coming from the producer world, especially on the low end, you do not want kicks and sub bass and bass lines clashing with each other like in the frequency spectrum, okay? So, yeah, so that's what I was able to do here, and I made a significant difference in that one. And then on the others, I went through and did various things. You basically just have to go through, and most important is finding the piece that you want, and then you highlight it, you do that. You can try several different things. It's non-destructive, meaning it doesn't affect the original audio files. So you could just try all of them, see if you get what you want, and then applying the different filters, the 6 or 7 that I showed, or the effects on the samples, and then you can just see what you think is going to work for you. And what you're really doing the whole time is you're keeping in mind, going back to that conversation that we had about full-length stems, and like I said, you might get 30 tracks or 15 tracks or something, very separated, very granular, those stems. Maybe even if you're not producing in a DAW or whatever, just keep that concept in mind, because what you're trying to do is effectively extract from a full completed song, and that's what the different technologies for stem separation, like in the case of DJ.Studio app, are really good at. And so that's what you're trying to do, because you're not getting the original stems, right? So you're having to do this without either unofficially or they're unavailable to get what would be those traditional stems to work on as a music producer. Okay, so we've moved along items 1 through 6 from my original outline, and we're up to arranging the mashup. So let's talk about that. A couple ways that a couple more things I could do with the samples after I've extracted them is, for example, I could select it, and in order to move it over this direction so that it's underneath my anchor song, I can hold down the Option key, and I can just select it and move it. And this is common in a lot of DAWs and video editing suites. And you can see how it leaves the original, and it just has basically made a copy. It's non-destructive, again, so it doesn't really matter. I'm going to undo that. Another way you could do it is you can highlight that, and you could do this also when you extracted it, is you could just go Save Sample. And if you do that, then it's going to save the sample to your library, which you can see down here, right? And so you can see a number of other menu items here. We'll touch on a few of those a little bit, but for right now, we're just looking at samples. I've got 6 or 7 here that I had extracted, and there they are. And so in that case, once they're down there, you can do a couple things. One is you can preview them, which is kind of cool, right? So we'll recognize some of these. Okay, so those are the samples from the Rooster track that we went through and previewed earlier. Okay, so the other thing that you could do at that point is you could drag them, drop them. You could see the plus sign in there. I'm not going to do it because I already have them in here, but you can drag and drop them into anywhere on the 2 sample lanes, sample lane 1, sample lane 2. All right, let's go focus over on the side with the anchor, which is going to ultimately become the mashup, and let's get into the details of that. Okay, so I first just started throwing things at the wall, spaghetti at the wall approach, and that's kind of fun, and just sort of see what sticks, what doesn't. And then after time, I realized, okay, kind of like I would do in producing original music, you typically want to have the same or similar sound and instrument on each track. And so in the case of DJ.Studio app, as I've said a few times, we're dealing with just these 4 lanes. Deck 1, Deck 2 are the original songs, and then I've got sample lane 1, sample lane 2. They may, enhance that in the future, but right now that's what we've got. So we're 4-tracking it, basically. Really 3-tracking it, because we're just going to have the anchor song up here and then these 2 lanes for samples. So ultimately what I ended up doing was deciding that sample lane 1 was going to be instrumentation only, and then I decided sample lane 2 would be the shorter vocal snippets and those kinds of things. So let's go through and take a look at some of what I ultimately ended up with here. And this will be a good example. We're not going to solo anything. We're just going to let it run. Actually, we'll solo the original tune. Right? And then let's rewind it, unsolo, and listen again. Just a little cook-off from our boy Gaio Steve. So let's move on up and go to the next one, and we'll solo. Right? Okay, we'll unsolo, we'll go back.
So, you know anything about techno?
All right, so now we're starting to get some blend in there. So let's go on to this next bit. Let's go solo. All right, let's run it back. Let's see what the difference is if we have our mashup sample overlaid. All right, and let's continue on. And so these are kind of similar. You can tell it's the same sample that was overlapped, and we know what some of these sound like. And we only extracted 5 or 6, so it's not like 100 going on here. So we're not going to listen to every one of those. Let's move on to another interesting part. Let's solo this section. All right, cool. So let's unsolo that and listen again with whatever this piece of instrumentation was that was added. And I can tell you it was the rumble bass line, the kind of donk bass line. Let's go. Right, and so I did a little messing around with some vocal in there too. But let's keep on going. And so it's going to build up and roll out here. Let's solo this.
House music.
All right, so very quiet. The original Musica de la Casa song, very quiet in there for impact on the build-up. But I thought it was kind of cool. I messed around for a while with this bass line sample, and then we'll just give it this super simple difference.
Music.
Right, so I just thought that was really cool. Like if you've gotten familiar with a little bit of that bass line chunk running through there in the breakdown section, okay. And one of the reasons I didn't run that piece of bass line all the way out is because in this section the kick doubles up. So let's take a quick listen. Yeah, you can hear it there in this area. It's just a kick every other beat. Right, and then it goes back to the normal 4 on the floor, and it just didn't sound good with the bass line on top of everything else that was going on. So some artistic choices there. So let's keep moving, and we'll check out this next part. Let's solo this.
Music.
Right, so that's that section of the Musica de la Casa song. Let's see what it's like with the overlap sample.
House music.
Right, so simple call. Okay, we've heard that a few times. And we're going to take a look at this. This one's a little bit different. It's going to take us into a different part of the conversation. Right, so that's what the original was. Now there's something going on here that we haven't seen yet, right? And I'll come back to that in just a minute as we talk about the mixing aspect of the mashup.
techno?
Right, okay. So let's just keep on moving. We've got one more major element here to listen to. So we're gonna go right here. Original song. Basic kick, bass, and the riser. Right, cool. And then let's go back and pop it right there. Right, so you can hear that the rave stab. All right, so you know it's in there. And then it basically repeats, but there's some differences. We're going to circle back to that in a second. And then some of the other sounds basically replicated. And so you can see the whole mashup is now taking place in here over the anchor song. Okay, we've made it 1 through 7 up to arranging the mashup and went through all the pieces that I had assigned in the different parts of the timeline. And then number 8 is mixing the mashup. So typically when people talk about mixing in the context of audio engineering, writing songs, DJing, etc., they're making sure that all of the sounds are coming together in a cohesive way, or glued together, which is in fact even the name given to certain types of devices and or software now that helps you kind of glue everything together, okay? Without getting too far into the world of all of that, at the end of the day, what we've kind of mirrored that workflow that would be used in a digital audio workstation like Ableton Live. And I say that in the context, the parallel would be we picked some songs or sounds. We chose something to be the anchor, in this case, the whole song. Then we went to the other sounds or songs that we had and extracted samples from them. Then we took those and just simply moved them over for the most part and laid them out on the timeline, arranged them in the way that we felt made sense. We know that we have a limitation of the quantity of tracks here. We're looking at the 3. And so that's basically where we've arrived at. Now, when I did this, along the way, I did some of the mixing, which is pretty typical if you're producing in the DAW and you're actually doing the engineering and mixing work at the same time. Then you would typically not just be picking sounds and laying them out in the arrangement. You would probably be applying some defaults from your template. This is what you end up with over the years, this kind of thing for the mixing aspect. But let's just look exactly at what some of those mixing things are. Okay, so if I go to the beginning point, and in this case, we'll just listen to things together. There's nothing done on this particular sample, right? So this is that first Gaio Steve Rooster call, and it sounded fine as it was, so I just left it. Sounds fine to me. Not going to put a whole lot of effort into that. Same thing with the next 2.
Do you know anything about techno?
Right, so those vocals sounded fine in that situation. The first place where I did some mixing, on this sample in particular, if you recall when we first extracted it, I told you, or you saw that it had the full kick drum in it as well, and the bass line. And so we applied number 1, which was a step towards mixing back when we did the samples in the first place, was applying this low cut, or this high pass, high and mid pass. And so that's how we end up with the little do-do-do-do thing that I wanted, right? And so let's just listen to that first. So the only bass line you're hearing and the only kick you're hearing is from the anchored Música de la Casa song, okay? And then the other thing that I applied to it, when I first put it on this side underneath doing the mashup, it was just too loud, right, when it came in. Too much impact, so I put in a volume curve, which we talked about earlier. And this envelope I put it somewhere around minus 12 dB, pretty typical for bringing in some kind of sound. It blends in, it peaks roughly at 0. I thought it was too loud at 0, so it's about minus 2. And then I have a quick envelope coming down this 12 range, and then a little bit further down, and a little bit further down again. So let's just listen to a little bit of that to see what's going on. You can hear the boop, 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 getting louder. And then because it drops out up here, you may have asked, well, why did I start the envelope there? Well, because it drops out up here, and there's no more full instrumentation and song, this was just overwhelming, right? So that's why I dropped it out. Let's move on.
Do you know anything about
And so I wanted this section in the original song, like I said, it's more traditional house or tech house kind of thing, bit more organic, funky vibe. And so in line with that, the breakdown is pretty hollow or pretty empty there, pretty minimal. And so I just wanted to fill it in some so that this whole thing sort of starts to gel together like a mashup of the two tunes and the two vibes and all that, right? And so I left that boop, 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 going, and you have to listen hard to hear it, but it's in there.
techno?
All right, you get the idea there. Same thing here above, it gets even quieter in the anchor. So we're gonna, another envelope, bringing it even further down. And that's just, I did listening several times doing this to get it to where it felt good. And then Rooster samples continue. And then we talked about this rumble bass-ish thing from the Rooster techno style song. And let's go ahead and listen.
House music.
Right, so it sounds like maybe there's a little bit of that rumble bass going on under here, this sample. I was messing around with some things, so maybe that wasn't the way I left it. But anyway, moving on, you get the idea, right? And so some more automation and mixing is in this sample. This is that, so, do you know anything about techno? And you can see, so, do you know anything about, and then that word is techno. And I didn't want to have the rest of that in there because this next section that you're going to hear is pretty much the peak of the whole song, where it's got everything going on between the two songs and the main elements of the two songs. And so I basically dropped the volume to -50. You can't hear it, and that's the max you can go with this effect in the DJ.Studio app. And then I just did a hard up to 5 so that it comes in immediately, and you can hear that. It's the same exact sample. I didn't change anything.
Techno.
Right? So to accentuate it, I put a filter envelope up here, and you can hear that down, right? And that makes it even quieter. It accentuates the little techno snippet, and then it comes in, and there's even the kick from the trill thing, and the kick was part of that sample as well, you might recall from before. And I just put an envelope extreme on it going down because the kick actually layered nice. I thought I was going to have to cut it short, but I didn't want to cut this sample short, because if I cut it short here, then the original song that I took the sample from, it's got some reverb and effects that trail out over that kick, and if I cut it short, it just sounded like that. And so these are kind of considerations that you want to think about if you're really trying to refine something and mix it, again, within the tools that we've got here. Okay, so we're going to let that full impact come in.
Techno.
Okay, and recall on this one, pretty mellow when it comes in. There's nothing too crazy going on. There's a da-da-da-da-da-da, and then the original song, of course, and that filter brought it into there. So let's go listen to this one. As this comes to the end, on this one down here this time, I put the filter because I want to let the original song just continue jamming. It's rolling. It's the bass line. It's the kick. It's the original instrumentation and some of the vocals. So I'm going to let that keep rolling. You hear the filter kind of coming in. And I even dropped the volume 100%, and that's because up here is saying house music, and I wanted that from up there. And again, I don't want to go through and start messing with a bunch of samples from my anchor. I don't need to, because in DJ.Studio app, I've got some automation, and I can get it done without doing all of that. All right, so we'll keep moving on. And this essentially is going to repeat. It looks exactly like the same arrangement, like it's going to repeat the same situation as before, but let's listen for the subtle difference.
Techno.
All right, so they're the same sample, but the difference is coming from up top. So the original song, the anchor, has some different things going on, and so you get a little bit different feel there. We'll move on down to here, and you can see I've put in this filter going down and up, and the reason for that is there's some instrumentation in here that was not over here and here the last time that I did it, and I realized this once I started trying to do the mixing because it was just so full right here, both with vocal and with like both. It's a part of the song, of each different song. It's a part that's like the peak of it building up before it starts to tail out for the mix out. So let's just listen. Right, so that just sounds real smooth to me. So that's what, when I'm talking about this step 8 for mixing the mashup, that's primarily what I'm referring to. So we will wrap that bit up there and let's move on. Okay, home stretch, baby. We're down to number 9, which is rendering the mashup. Easiest part we've got. Everything's been done. We've listened to the whole thing by itself. The mix sounds good. Everything sounds cohesive. And we're going to go from there and export it. So you could just click export and go about your business here. But what's going to happen is, and if you're familiar with Ableton Live or other DAWs, you'll realize I didn't do any selection of what I'm actually going to export. So this is going to export the whole project. So in order to prevent that, and this next step also goes back to a bit of the reason why in DJ.Studio app, I like to put the anchor and do all this work on the left, because what we're going to do is get rid of all this. So instead of having to go through and select everything and maybe not be sure about what's going to happen, or if we delete all the stuff or some of the stuff or the wrong stuff, we're organized, which is great. And so all we have to do is go back to our playlist. And the cool thing about DJ.Studio in this regard is we know that this was our anchor, the first track. This was the next one. And we just go over here to the right and boop, hit delete. That's it. Back to the studio. If we zoom out and in, it's gone. No more. So all we have left is the mashup. So now we can go ahead and export. And we'll go to the first one. We've got MP3, WAV, etc. I'm just going to go ahead and pick WAV for example's sake. On the master gain, I just leave it at this -2 and let the auto gain stay on. Seems to work fine for these purposes. And then the use limiter, these are the defaults. And then I go ahead and hit export. Okay. And then that's going to take a little bit of time rendering, just like any DAW would as well. And that's going to go through its paces. And so while it's doing that, one of the things you may have noticed that I did not do was I did not save the project. And I don't want to save the project because remember I deleted that track and all of my sample work that went with it. So I don't want to save that and have that be part of it. Okay. So the export's done. It sent a local file to the default area on my local machine, and so I'm just going to go ahead and close that, and we're right back at the project. Again, I did not save the project because although I do have all my samples and I have them all down here, that's fine. But I liked having the workflow where we had the one song in this case, or multiple songs perhaps, with all the samples that we chose over on the right, so that I kind of know where I got them from. I can remember what the vibe was all about, and I could do a walkthrough like this, right? So I don't save it at this point. I would either undo Control Z to get the section back that I got rid of. So yeah, I did Control Z a couple times and then I got it back, and you can see if I go back to the studio project, now everything's back there again. So I haven't lost anything. And that's just where I would leave it at, and then you can save it, no problem, as we did many times along the way. And we've made it to the end, my friends. And so, yeah, let's take a quick recap just for a wrap up. So again, we started with the playlist. We created our new project. We brought a bunch of songs in. We looked at the recommended key detection and mix recommendations. We listened through some songs. We picked the two that we thought would be fun that go together. We went over to the studio part. The two songs themselves were already there on deck 1 and 2. That's just a feature of DJ.Studio that it does that for you. The only thing I really did was where the crossfade section was, I moved my songs to the far right and left so the crossfade had nothing in it. And then I went to work on identifying samples in my sample tracks, and I extracted them. I saved them, whatever method that I used for that stem. I then saved them to my library. I could have saved them just to the mix, but I just saved them to the library so that I could use them in other places if I wanted to in the future. Then we went over and we looked at our anchor song, which is essentially running throughout the whole mix and has very little automation or mixing or anything on it because it's already both of these are actually already commercially available songs, but we know they're already good in that context, so we don't need to mess with that a lot. Then we went down and we arranged all of our samples first. We did that pass, and then we came back. And like I said, you could do some of the mixing, which means volume controls or filtering or drop, high passes, low passes, whatever it is you want to do with the 6 or 7 effects that DJ.Studio app has in it. You could do those along the way. The workflow that I gave was us going through and doing simple arrangement first, and then coming back and doing the automation to really tighten it up and make it cohesive and glue things together. And then we just went to the playlist. We deleted the song any of the sample related songs, and they take all the samples with them for purposes of doing the export and rendering. And then we just went back and we did the export, we did the render, we saved it, and we're ready for the dance floor, baby. But wait, there's more. Earlier in the beginning, I mentioned that I'd like to have the project and the original 2 songs, which I produced, and then the mashup itself, all available for download. I don't know if those will be part of the official video, the full-length video when it's published. But if you make it to the end and you see that and you're interested in those things, you can go to my website at itswesmithyo.com, message me there, or any social media at itswesmithyo, and Instagram and TikTok probably easiest. And then find me, and we'll find a way to sort you out. Okay, thanks for hanging, my friends, and I'm going to leave this with the full mashup version playing at the end, and get out there and make some mashups. Whoa!
Do you know anything about techno?